Guys, welcome to a classic movie review of 1957's 12 Angry Men, starring Henry Fonda, Lee J. Cobb and Martin Balsam. Directed by Sidney Lumet, this is the courtroom drama, the gripping tale of a jury in a New York City murder trial that's frustrated by a single member whose caution and scepticism forces them to look more carefully at the evidence before jumping to a hasty guilty verdict. Now, what we're looking at here is essentially a masterclass in cinematic minimalism, storytelling and character study. Now, shot almost entirely within the confines of a single jury room, the film takes an obvious verdict and a straightforward deliberation and turns it into a claustrophobic examination of justice, prejudice and moral responsibility. Now, with about the tightest screenplay ever and a formidable cast fronted by Henry Fonda, 12 Angry Men remains one of the greatest examples of screen drama in film history. Let's take a look.
I'm telling you, everything that's gone on has been twisted and turned. This business with the glasses? How do you know she didn't have them on? This woman testified in open court.
So when you boil 12 Angry Men down, it's a movie about 12 jurors deliberating the fate of a young man accused of murdering his father. The defendant, a teenager from a disadvantaged background, faces the death penalty if convicted. Now, at first glance, the case seems pretty open and shut. 11 of the jurors are ready to vote guilty and be done with it, and it's only juror number 8, played by Henry Fonda, who doesn't agree. And not because he's convinced of the boy's innocence, but because he believes the decision demands more careful consideration before so effortlessly sending someone to their death. Now, at first, the other jurors, who are not named and only go by their juror numbers, are mildly irritated by Fonda's refusal to toe the line, but this soon triggers a slow unravelling of everyone's patience, and it's not long before assumptions and biases and a whole load of tension start to boil to the surface. And the genius of 12 Angry Men is that it's not really about a court case or even the young man in question whose life hangs in the balance, but about the jurors themselves as people. One by one, they'll all be forced to confront not only the details of the case, but also their own motivations and prejudices. But the film still does meticulously dissect each piece of evidence: an old man's testimony, a switchblade knife, a woman's eyewitness account. But what it does is that it takes all these things and uses them to question the reliability of perception and memory. There's a commitment to realism here that sounds dull but is nothing of the sort. 12 Angry Men doesn't feature any elaborate flashbacks, over-the-top drama or even any outside scenes. 99% of it takes place in what becomes the claustrophobic, hot and cramped jury room. Now, I have to talk about Sidney Lumet here because this is jaw-droppingly his first feature film. Lumet had worked in television for about 5 years up to this point, and of course would go on to make films like Serpico, Dog Day Afternoon, Prince of the City, and there's an argument that 12 Angry Men is basically a star-studded TV movie. But what Lumet achieves here with one set, letting his cameras follow the jurors without being too showy, rotating around them, taking their point of view, moving up for some claustrophobic close-ups. He makes heated conversations feel like action scenes. Now, it's well written that Lumet and his crew slowly move the walls of the actual set inwards as the story progresses, and it gives an almost imperceptible feeling of oppression, building towards a pressure cooker atmosphere as the jurors clash. Now, Henry Fonda, who I think also served as a co-producer here, anchors the movie with some of his trademark quiet dignity. His portrayal of juror number 8 isn't overly heroic or melodramatic. He's basically just a simple man of principles who believes in justice and due process. Now, Fonda's performance is a textbook example of restraint. He lets his character's moral conviction speak louder than any heated or impassioned speech could. And of course, on that note, opposite Fonda, we have an amazing Lee J. Cobb as juror number 3. He's a dude who's on the flip side of the emotional spectrum, a man whose personal baggage is clouding his judgment. He begins the film simply agitated and impatient, but Cobb gradually moves the character, not into a villain role, but he's certainly ferocious and he's ultimately quite tragic. Now, certainly during the film's emotional climax, which is basically one of the greatest in cinematic history, his character unravelling under the weight of his own unresolved issues with his son. Now, elsewhere, look out for standout performances from E.G. Marshall's coldly rational Juror number 4, Jack Warden's indifferent Juror number 7, and Martin Balsam as Juror number 1. Now, even though they are unnamed, each one of these guys is basically a fully realised character representing a cross-section of American society. So yeah, for a film that's essentially 96 minutes of men talking, 12 Angry Men zips by at quite a pace. There's a clever balance of dialogue and silence, sometimes just using body language and facial expressions to get across people's reactions and thoughts. And the movie does make you think and wonder what you would do in such a situation. And for me personally, who has so far not been summoned for any kind of jury duty, it's a fascinating peek behind the scenes. And again, for me personally, it's quite a chilling look at the responsibility that comes with jury duty. It's scary how fragile justice can be. Just one voice or one dissenting opinion making the difference between life and death. Now, being a relatively simple production also makes 12 Angry Men quite timeless, I think. Though it's, of course, set in the 1950s, its themes of bias and social snobbery, racism, and the fallibility of the justice system don't really seem out of place now. So we have probably got 12 Angry Men to thank for decades of courtroom dramas, everything from Anatomy of a Murder to A Few Good Men, to Lumet's own The Verdict. All feature echoes of Lumet's approach here. Now, the movie is about as flawless as you can get, I think. It's shot in stark black and white, which I'm sure saved money, but also adds that docudrama feel that adds to the realism. Now, aside from the opening and closing credits also, there's no musical score here, which not only allows the characters' voices to be basically the primary noise, but also removes any manufactured drama. Now, like I mentioned, Sidney Lumet's background in theatre and television served him well here. There's almost a stage-like intimacy to the movie, but it still feels cinematic. So 12 Angry Men was nominated for 3 Oscars, but lost out in all categories to Bridge on the River Kwai, which won most things that year, which is a tough one for me because I love River Kwai. And any other year, 12 Angry Men would have scooped some trophies. But anyway, now this movie is not just a film about a jury's deliberation. It's a spotlight on human nature, democracy, and the meaning and mechanics of justice. Now, the 1950s was brimming with great movies, to be sure. Vertigo, Singing in the Rain, The Seven Samurai, Night of the Hunter, On the Waterfront. And this movie, a film literally about 12 angry men cooped up in an office complaining about the heat, worried about missing the ball game, and indifferent as to whether a young guy will get the death penalty or not, can safely stand beside any of those movies as a true classic. Go check it out.
Well, what do you want? I say he's guilty.
We want to hear your arguments.
I gave you my arguments.
We're not convinced. We want to hear them again.